All right, hello everyone, good morning. Welcome to an introduction to ASP.NET vNext, which is the future of .NET on the server. My name is Daniel Roth, and I'm a senior program manager on the ASP.NET team. I've been working on .NET for a little while, about 10 years or so. I joined Microsoft and started working on, I think it was then .NET 2. Worked on the managed networking APIs, system.NET. I worked on WCF, I worked on SOAP services, I worked on ASMX services, if you remember those things, way back when. A lot of stuff has happened in .NET over the years, and I've got to say, there has never been a more exciting time to be working with .NET than now. It is pretty cool, some of the things that are happening with .NET. And I love this slide, because it makes me feel a little bit like Carl Sagan. You know, we've got billions and billions of active .NET installs. And that's just the ones that are active, the ones that are actually receiving Windows updates. We have millions of professional .NET developers out there adding value every day, writing C# code, VB. We have .NET on pretty much any kind of device that you can imagine that you want to target. You can write .NET code that runs on huge, powerful servers or little tiny embedded devices. You can write .NET code that will run on your Android device, your iPhone, you know, running on iOS. .NET is pretty much everywhere, which is just really, really cool. On the server in particular, .NET has always been especially strong. We've worked very hard to make sure that our server story for .NET for running web applications is standards-based. We have great support for the latest HTML5 suite of standards, CSS3, and some of the best editors on the planet for dealing with those standards. We've also been working really hard to make sure you can use the most modern application patterns, you know, lots of JavaScript on the client, you know, support for TypeScript, fantastic JavaScript editor. If you were at my talk yesterday, I showed you that we've been doing some new stuff where if you're doing front-end development, we have tooling around Grunt and Bower and NPM and Gulp. If you're writing line of business applications and you want them to be scalable and secure, .NET has always shined in that space. But what are we hearing from customers about what we need to be doing with .NET going forward? Well, we hear first of all that companies are becoming more and more software-driven than ever before, and developers are being asked to deliver more value than ever before, even expected to deliver software continuously. There's just this flow of software that just pours off your fingertips into some server someplace and just magically always works. And you need a platform, a .NET platform that is as agile and fast at delivering value as you are. A .NET platform that can keep up with the latest developments in the web space and the server space. You also hear that customers need a cross-device development strategy. You need to be able to target more devices than ever before, and you'd like to have a way to do that that doesn't involve rewriting your application, you know, 6, 7 times with 6, 7 different code bases. I think we also see, though, that in terms of cross-device development, you know, a lot of people have their Windows machines in Visual Studio, and they're doing development on that. That's great. And we also see a lot of glowing fruit. And I'm looking out in the audience. I see a few glowing fruits staring back at me as well. How do we stay relevant in a developer environment that is becoming more and more diversified? We also hear from our customers that open source is important. Our stuff needs to be open source because that creates this vibrant community around that open source project. It gives you control. It gives you a say in what's happening in the project. If you want to contribute code, you can do that. And we want to make sure that the .NET platform, ASP.NET, is able to have that vibrant community, that open source community around it. But lastly, we still hear, though, but wait, I've got a bunch of apps already. You know, don't leave me behind. I need these things to still work. I need to be able to carry them forward. And so we hear that as well. We understand. So there's a new approach that we're taking with .NET. At the core of it all is an increased investment in innovation in the .NET space. Hopefully, you've observed this. You know, have you seen Roslyn? Roslyn is the C# compiler, you know, in managed code shipping on NuGet. And it's open source, the whole compiler. You can get the whole thing and just use it. You want to get the latest C# 6 features, just grab the NuGet package. You could just try it out. That's amazing. New jitters, you know, .NET native, lots of innovation coming. We're going to be talking about ASP.NET vNext, lots of interesting stuff being done on the server as well. An increased focus on flexibility and agility. More and more of the stuff that we're shipping, instead of shipping on a year or multi-year cadence in Windows. I mean, Windows is increasing its cadence as well, but we'd like to move even a little bit faster. Instead, a lot of the stuff we're shipping now is on NuGet packages on a very, very rapid cadence. And then, of course, an increased emphasis on openness. Everything we're trying to do, we want to tell you. We want to be transparent. You want to see what our devs are working on right now? Everything I'm showing you could see today. You could go right and look at our Git repositories on GitHub, check it out. You could try a nightly build. Sure, go ahead. We want to have that open, transparent dialogue with our customers. Maybe you heard about the .NET Foundation. The .NET Foundation is an independent organization which has been tasked with driving forward the open source .NET community. We've contributed a whole bunch of our stuff into the .NET Foundation. All the ASP.NET technologies, MVC, Web API, Web Pages, our data stack is there, Entity Framework, Azure SDK libraries are all in there. And this is not just us. There's also external partners as well. Xamarin's contributed a bunch of stuff into the .NET Foundation. So we hope that this will continue that sense of openness and community where everyone can contribute and we're all trying to work together. So in terms of .NET then, today if you look at the way .NET is structured, you kind of get a one-size-fits-all solution. And that one size is extra, 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 extra large. It's just kind of this got everything in it. Imagine you got this huge, giant poncho-sized shirt that does everything. It can do client apps, desktop apps with WPF. You can do SOAP services. You can do workflow. You can do ASMEX services is still there. Everything that we've ever done is still there. It's everything in the kitchen sink in a one-size-fits-all platform. Where we're going in the future is these much more specialized, agile, componentized platforms. On the client, maybe you've heard of .NET Native. .NET Native is the ability to take your C# code and actually run it through the C++ optimized compiler. And you can get just amazingly small footprints and really, really fast startup times doing that. They've also done on the client side a bunch of innovations around being able to do cross-platform development, working closely with Xamarin to enable that on Android and iOS devices. On the server, that's what we're going to be talking about today. We are creating a cloud-optimized runtime that it has just, we're shooting for just fantastic high throughput numbers, really low memory usage, cross-platform enabled. That's what we're going to be talking about. And at the bottom of it all is a common core investment in .NET infrastructure, things like NuJitter, Roslyn, the ability to create portable class libraries that can be used across all these stacks. It's still all just .NET. All the things you know about .NET still apply. And of course, we want everything to be open, open source, and transparent. So what is ASP.NET vNext? ASP.NET vNext is the following things. First, it is a new flexible cross-platform runtime. You can run it on your Windows machine, you can run it on a Mac, you can run it on Linux. All those things are totally cool. There's a new modular HTTP request pipeline. That means no more system web. System web has been great. It's a fantastic HTTP pipeline. We've been using it for the last 14 years. It has, though, begins to show its age a little bit. It was originally designed for ASP, classic ASP compat, and it has a whole bunch of things in it that maybe you don't necessarily want. We need a modern, new HTTP request pipeline where you can be as componentized and modular, pull it in as much as you want, leave the rest out if you want to get bare metal performance. So there's a new HTTP request pipeline. The whole stack is being built cloud ready. When we built .NET, cloud wasn't a thing yet. And so a lot of the stuff we've done with the cloud has been, oh, well, we need to make that work somehow. And I would say we've done a pretty decent job. Get the experience of getting a .NET application from your dev machine up into Azure, integrating with Azure services, it's not bad. But there are still areas of friction. We're having to take your web.config and run it through all sorts of crazy mutations in order to get things to work in the cloud. There's still a bunch of things that really weren't designed with a clustered environment in mind. We have an opportunity now to make the whole stack cloud ready from the get-go. The frameworks you're going to be using to build web apps are the same frameworks that you know and love. MVC, Web API, Web Pages, SignalR, it's all the same frameworks that you know, but with benefits, with new improvements that will hopefully make your web development less confusing, faster, more productive. And then lastly, there's a new tooling experience. that's coming with ASP.NET vNext in Visual Studio 14. That's its code name. Visual Studio 14, it's already out in preview. You can try it today. But our tooling experience for ASP.NET vNext, it's in Visual Studio 14. It's an agile, lightweight tooling experience that's supposed to give you the same feel that you might expect for something like an interpreted style platform like Node or Ruby or Python, but still being able to leverage the power and the strong typing of C# and .NET. And everything we're doing is open source on GitHub. You should check it out. So let me go into detail about what each of these things really means. So a new flexible cross-platform runtime. We have literally written a new CLR host. You know, the CLR is this thing that's actually going to be running your code, and it runs inside a host process, and someone needs to actually host it. And we have written a new CLR host that has the flexibility to actually run one of multiple CLRs. There's the .NET Framework desktop CLR that you know and love today. We can run on top of that CLR. And that, if you run on top of that CLR, that's where you're going to get the most compatibility. Like your existing binaries that are used to the lay of the land in the .NET Framework as it stands today, those binaries will just work in that world. Best compatibility story. But you need the full .NET Framework on the machine in order to be able to use it, which may or may be OK. May or may not be OK. The cloud-optimized CLR, or core CLR, is a version of the CLR that has been slimmed down and trimmed and refactored so that it can even be run completely self-contained within your application. You can actually deploy this CLR with your app, and it supports true side-by-side versioning. And then the thing that you normally think of as the .NET Framework of all these libraries that ships in Windows is now just a set of NuGet packages that you pull into your app as needed. That's the cloud-optimized CLR. And then the third one is the mono CLR. If you want to run cross-platform on a Mac or Linux, we have support for actually hosting the running on top of the mono CLR today. You can try it out right now. I'm going to show it to you later today. Now, the new runtime host also changes a little bit how you think about dependency management. It improves the dependency management experience. Before, you probably thought about assemblies, right? I reference assemblies, I have assembly references. That's all good. In this world, the way you should think about it is you are now referencing NuGet packages. And the runtime actually has native understanding of the additional metadata in the package, like the things that it depends on, and the version ranges that can show up in NuGet packages. So the runtime has a first-class understanding of NuGet, and that's how you're going to be managing dependencies going forward. And then lastly, the runtime has deep integrated support for Roslyn. Compilation in this runtime is happening using Roslyn, and it can even happen at like dependency load time. Like if you have a dependency on some package, and then you're like, I think there's maybe some bug in this thing. Like I need to check it out and fix it. You could go to the open source repository for that package, clone it, reference that cloned git copy, and have it get compiled on the fly by Roslyn. You can go debug it, make a change, and say, yeah, there's a bug here. You fix it. Your app still works. Any thing that depended on that package still works. You can then submit your pull request, get a new build, pull that one in, and you're good to go. So Roslyn, in ASP.NET, we've always had a compilation system. In the past, it was actually based on CSE, compiling things on the fly. No more. In the new ASP.NET vNext, we're using Roslyn across the board for our compilation story. Let me tell you a little bit more about this cloud-optimized runtime, because this thing is pretty cool. Like I said, it's a slimmed-down version of the CLR. And then all of the things that you normally think about being the .NET Framework that aren't really part of its core, WCF, WIF, web forms, WinForms, these are things that are all in your apps today, whether you want them or not. Like when you have an ASP.NET web application sitting on a server, if there's some issue with WPF that we have to push out a Windows update for, that it fixes WPF, well, your server is going to get that update too, even though you're not using WPF at all. But in this world, the CLR is slimmed down, and the framework has been refactored into a set of NuGet packages. And so you just pull in the pieces of the base class libraries that you need. If there's an issue in some package that you're not using, that doesn't affect you, because you weren't using that package at all. You can have a reduced surface area. Now, as part of creating that factored view of the .NET Framework, that meant actually doing a little bit of tweaking, a little bit of changes to the API surface area to enable that to happen. There are some unfortunate dependencies in the .NET Framework today that make it refactoring it hard to do in a fully compatible way. So some changes had to be made to the API surface area to create new API contracts that are nicely factored that we could use for the basis of the NuGet packages. And this isn't anything that's really new. If you've written Windows Store applications, Windows Store applications, when you write them in C#, are written against a profile of .NET, and that profile consists of a set of API contracts that are similar. You know, this still feels like .NET, but they've been slightly refactored compared to what's actually in the full .NET framework. And what we've done with ASP.NET vNext is just extended that set of API contracts to include the server. Okay? And this runtime supports true side-by-side versioning. I've talked with many customers in the past who are unfortunately not on the latest version of .NET. How many of you are writing applications today that are targeting not the latest version of .NET? Lots and lots of hands go up. Okay, yes. And we suspect, and you can come afterwards and tell me if this hypothesis is true, that one of the reasons why you may not be on the latest version of .NET is concerns about compatibility. When we update .NET, often we do it in place. And when we do it in place, we affect everything on the box. And so we had a customer once who had like a machine with 60 apps on it. And they were on .NET 4. And they were asking, you know, I want to move to .NET 4.5, but how do I do that in a way and make sure that none of my apps are going to break? You know, as soon as I install .NET 4.5, everything's going to be affected. And this app over here, this app was written by a consultant like 5 years ago, and he's gone. And no one knows how that app works anymore. And if we have to maintain it, well, you know, we're kind of screwed. We just can't do that. You know, maybe some of you have been in similar situations. And this often results in, like, you know, IT departments saying, you know, updating to .NET. No, we can't do that. You know, that will take us months and months, cost several $1 million or whatever. And no, we're going to stick with whatever we've currently got. Well, in this world, with a core CLR, you can bundle the core CLR and the related libraries with your app that you want, deploy it onto a machine, like say a Win2K8 R2 machine that has .NET 4 or whatever on it, and it will use the runtime that came with it. And if you deploy another app to that machine with core CLR that runs on an even newer version of the runtime and newer versions of packages, those two apps don't affect each other at all. There's no GAC or binding policies that overrides what you're loading. You can have true side-by-side versioning, and it will support down level. So that's what the promise of the core CLR. We'll see a little bit of that today as well. All right. New modular HTTP request pipeline. What is that? So modular means that in this request pipeline, you get only what you say you want and nothing else. Today with System Web and the existing HTTP pipeline, there's a bunch of stuff that's there, whether you like it or not. And that results in a bunch of allocations of memory and stuff that you may not need. And if you're really trying to get bare metal performance and you want to strip all that stuff out, and today it's really impossible to do. In this new pipeline, you can put in as much as you want. If it's not there, it's not there. And then you can get really, really fast performance. It's tended to be fast and lean. And it's intended to also support flexible hosting. You can host it inside of IIS, just like you've always been able to do, and you can even host it self-hosted on an HTTP listener like API. Now, we actually even have a new HTTP listener implementation that we've been working on. We call it Web Listener, which sits very, very tight to HTTP sys, and we just get phenomenal throughput performance on this listener. So, and same thing in IIS. IIS is also based on HTTP sys. We have a new plug-in point into IIS where we can sit really tight to HTTP sys and just get phenomenal throughput performance. It supports OWIN. Now, if you don't know what OWIN is, that's fine. Don't worry about it. But OWIN is the Open Web Interface for .NET. It's a community effort to define a contract between web apps and web servers, so that for .NET web apps and web servers, so you can swap out the server and swap out and put apps on different OWIN compliant servers. We started the journey in supporting OWIN with a project called Project Katana. Katana supports OWIN. You can think of Katana as like our first crack at creating a lightweight HTTP request pipeline for our future stack. Katana took a very opinionated viewpoint with OWIN that, you know, it supported OWIN, and it also surfaced the OWIN abstractions, which are these very low-level abstractions, as the programming model that you're going to use. So that meant like an HTTP request was this loosely typed dictionary of string to string. And you know, the model was like a funka something in order to program stuff. And it was a little raw. With the ASP.NET vNext, we've taken a lot of those learnings from Project Katana. We still support the OWIN abstraction, but when you're actually coding, we give you a nice HTTP context-like API, which is a lot friendlier to use. Built cloud ready. What does that mean? Well, it means a couple things. One is about configuration, like making sure that the system works really well with environment-based config. You have a bunch of values that are appropriate for your dev environment. You have a bunch of config values that are appropriate for dev, for test, staging. How do you set that up? Today, you mess around with a lot of config transforms. We have a new environment-based config system, a new API in ASP.NET vNext that we're using, and there's no longer web.config. System does not use web.config anymore. The new API is really, really simple. You just ask for a key, a value by name, and you get the value. And it has a set of providers that can pull those values from a variety of places. A local JSON file, local XML file is fine, environment variables, wherever you want. You can set up your own providers as well. So what this means is that you can have a local file on disk while you're developing. In your hosting environment, like maybe on your Azure website, you set up a bunch of environment variables that are specific to that environment, including, you could be things like secrets, like connection strings and so forth. You deploy the app into the environment, and it just picks up the right configuration values from the environment. That's the idea. Now, for more for services, things that are more complicated configuration, like your caching provider or your session state provider, we have decided to take a big bet on dependency injection. We have a common abstraction in ASP.NET vNext for dependency injection that we're using across the board for MVC, Web API, Web Pages, EF. Common abstraction. We do also provide a very simple IOC container out of the box just to bootstrap the system. But you, of course, can rip that out and replace it with your IOC container of choice, Ninject, Autofac, whatever you want to use. So big bet on DI. You can now use DI across the whole stack. We're working very hard to make sure that our COGS, our costs of operation, are very low. Low memory usage, high throughput. It's still a little early in the stack. Like the lower level pieces, like the web listener and the hosting pieces are very fast right now. As you go further up you go, and we're still in alpha stages, so a lot of that hasn't been fully optimized yet. But by the time we ship, we expect to have really good cost characteristics, in part because of the new cloud optimized runtime, where you're only really pulling in the things you need, so hopefully resource utilization is a lot lower. And the last thing for the cloud is we're working to have a really great diagnostics and tracing story, integration with ETW, integration with App Insights. So it's really easy to diagnose and troubleshoot problems in the cloud. Let's talk about frameworks now. So the world today with ASP.NET and frameworks is that we have a variety of flavors of different technologies that you can use. And these frameworks share a lot of things in common, but they don't. They differ in places that's unexpected. So for example, Web Pages and MVC, they both share Razor as the syntax for doing views. But they differ for everything else, like they use completely different HTML helpers. With MVC and Web API, they share a lot of concepts. They both use controllers, actions, filters, model binding, DI, validation, but they actually share no implementation at all. And one of the reasons for that is that MVC came first. It was built on top of System Web. When we built Web API, it came later, and we wanted Web API to be self-hostable outside of IIS with no System Web in the picture at all. So it couldn't take a dependency on all the System Web stuff, which is at the very base of MVC. So we kept a lot of the concepts, so it felt familiar, but we ended up having to implement everything twice. That's kind of unfortunate. It causes confusion. So what we're doing is we're taking Web Pages, MVC, Web API, and we're merging them into a single aligned web stack. Okay? So the way you should think about this is that the next version of Web API, like Web API 3, will be based on MVC 6. The next version of Web Pages 4, will be based on MVC 6. Web Pages 4, the way you could think about that is that you're basically writing MVC views that have like an auto-controller. And if you then want to grow up, like Web Pages was great for a very simple little app, and now you have a bigger team, you need to do testability and all that kind of stuff, you could then do a gesture that then just persists the controllers to disk, so you now actually have a full MVC pattern for your Web Pages application. Okay, so MVC 6 is going to have a common set of concepts, remove all the duplication. It'll be a single framework that can do both Web UI and Web APIs. It's built DI first, because everything we're doing in ASP.NET vNext is based off of DI. It can run in IIS, like it always has, and that's our premier host, but it can also now run self-hosted in your own process. We'll see that in a second. It's based on the new request pipeline in ASP.NET vNext, and it, of course, can run on the cloud-optimized runtime. All the other frameworks you know and love, like SignalR, ASP.NET Identity, EF, those are all available too, okay? Last thing, ASP.NET vNext includes a new agile development experience. Now, if you've done Node development or Ruby or Python, the experience you tend to get there is you're coding, you save, and then you F5 the browser, and you see the change immediately. Because it's an interpreted language. You go back, you code, you save, you F5. And it's this very rapid, iterative workflow. With .NET, there's a build step in there. You edit your code, you save, you got to build it and get it deployed, and then you can see the changes in the browser. What if you could get the best of both? You can get that agile development workflow, but also get the power of .NET. That's what we're working on in Visual Studio 14. There is a new project system for ASP.NET vNext that enables this. At the base of everything we're doing in tooling, we're also making sure that we have parity with a full command line set of tools. So everything that you do in Visual Studio, you should be able to do from the command line. And then it will include things like scaffolding, running, installing a new version of the runtime, restoring packages, installing packages, and so forth. And you should also be able to leverage the tools that you want to use. If you want to use like an online editor, a browser-based IDE, Visual Studio Online. If you want to use Sublime on your Mac for your editing, that's fine. You should be able to do those things too with ASP.NET vNext. And we'll show that. All right, let's take a look. What does it actually look like in reality? Every time I do that, every time I lock my laptop in these presentations, my first time trying to type my password is always wrong. OK, this is Visual Studio 14. All right? And if you want to get it, let me tell you where you're going to get it. You should go, and everyone should do this, ASP.NET/vNext. OK? Go to ASP.NET/vNext and click the big green button. And that's where you can get a preview install of Visual Studio 14. It is side-by-side with Visual Studio 2013. It's a tech preview, so it's early. There'll be bugs, there'll be issues. But you should go ahead and try it out. Do everything that I'm doing here. You can do it on your own. OK, what I'm going to do is file a new project and go to the web node. And you'll notice in the web node that there's the ASP.NET web application. That's the same experience that we've had since in Visual Studio 2013. If you want to create a MVC5, Web API 2 app, Web Forms app, and so forth. But now there are these new entries down here, and they're all tagged as ASP.NET vNext. Now, obviously, we're not going to call this thing ASP.NET vNext by the time we ship. The names will change. Otherwise, we'd have to call the next version ASP.NET vNext, and that would just be crazy. So the names will all change. But for now, they're called vNext. And for now, these templates are all showing up as siblings of the ASP.NET web application node. We don't expect it to ship that way either. We still believe in the one ASP.NET vision where everything should be, I just want to create a web app, and then you configure it, and then you go. But for now, they're top-level siblings. All right, this first one is just an empty web app. Hopefully, that's fairly self-explanatory. The second one is like the moral equivalent of the MVC template in the existing tooling. It wires up Bootstrap and MVC and some views and ASP.NET Identity, so you can log in users and so forth. Now, this is interesting. There's an ASP.NET vNext class library. Like, what is that? Like, why is there a special class library here? The way I think about this template, maybe a better name would be like ASP.NET vNext package, because this template is set up with all the ASP.NET vNext build infrastructure for creating packages and dealing with the new project.json files and dependencies and how they work in ASP.NET vNext. So maybe you could think of that as a ASP.NET vNext package is a way to think about that. But this last one is like, what? There's an ASP.NET vNext console app. Like, what is that? Well, so remember, we said that ASP.NET vNext can be fully self-hosted. If you want to fire up a little web server inside your console app, you can do that. So you could use this project template for doing self-hosted scenarios. If you were at my talk yesterday, I talked about this idea of web jobs, where these are these separate processes that can run in your website or in a separate website that can handle like background tasks, and they can have services in them and so forth. So this could be used for effectively server console apps is really what web jobs is. It's also just a really simple way to do Hello World. Like if you want to just get up and running, you want to console write-line something and see how ASP.NET vNext works at its fundamental layer. So that's what that one is. All right, let's go create, though, a normal web app. All right, so this is going to do package restore, and so restore all the packages that it needs to run. And hopefully what you're seeing in the Solution Explorer looks really familiar, right? There's controllers, there's models, there's views. These views are CSHTML like you expect for an MVC app. That's all well and good. Now there's some things, though, here that are new or interesting. First, let me expand the references node. And you can see here, first of all, that I'm running this app. By default, it's going to run on the normal .NET Framework CLR, 4.5.1 in this case. Now, these nodes that you're seeing here, these aren't assembly references. These are packages. And they're showing up as first-class citizens in the tooling. If I go digging through here, I can even see the dependency chain for all of the packages right from within Visual Studio. Okay? So you're seeing your whole NuGet package graph, your dependency graph, right within Visual Studio. Now, where are those dependencies coming from? They're coming from this new lightweight project.json file. In ASP.NET vNext, this is where you set up your dependencies. If you've used like Node or so forth, they have similar lightweight JSON files. Yes, we are kind of taking a page out of that book. So here's where all my dependencies are defined for my ASP.NET web application. So I'm using MVC and identity and so forth. Now, one of the nice things here is if I want to add dependencies, well, I get nice IntelliSense right here from within the JSON file. You see that? So it's kind of small. I wish I could zoom in, but it says Microsoft ASP.NET Diagnostics, and I can see the versions that I have available. I don't know if you saw, but you could also even search remotely on NuGet to find other packages, because the packages that are showing up here are the ones that VS locally installed. But if you want to go looking around on NuGet, you could do that right here from within the text editor. It's kind of nice. Now, we will also have the right-click add package using the NuGet Package Manager experience. We don't have that yet. It's coming very, very soon, actually. But really, all that thing will probably do is just give you a way to browse packages really easily, and then just edit this file, and then kick off a package restore immediately. So if I do add a package here, let me add the diagnostics package. Now, I'm going to expand this node so you can see it. OK, now pay close attention to the dependencies. OK, I'm going to save. Now, what happens is as soon as I click Save, kicks off a package restore, and boom, there comes the package. It just immediately comes in. All I had to do is save. There's no additional gesture. Similar if I remove it. Save. Then the package gets removed as part of the next package restore. Okay? So really simple, lightweight way of dealing with your dependencies. And these are all packages. All right? Now, what else is here? There is this startup.cs file. Now, if you've been following Project Katana, hopefully this looks at least somewhat familiar. Startup.cs, if you've been using Katana, oh, that's where I go to configure all the middleware that's used by my application. Now, before I go, I'm going to go through this in a second, but before I do that, let me just go ahead and run the application so you can see what the app does, so you can map that to the pieces that are in startup.cs. All right, so this looks like a normal MVC application. I can log in. I can register a new user. It's got home, about, contact, and so forth. Okay? So nothing too crazy there, but it's all the stuff that you would expect to see in a normal ASP.NET web app. All right, so let's go looking through what is in startup.cs. So this first part, that's the new environment-based configuration API. Very simple. You new up a config object, and then you set up the providers that you want to use for getting config values. In this particular case, it's getting config values from a local config.json file. And that's right over here, there. And this is, oh, that's where it's getting the connection string. Okay? No web.config in this file at all. No more pointy angle brackets that you cut yourself on and then curse it later. All right? That's environment-based config, and it's also saying I can get values from environment variables. So if you were to deploy this app to Azure and like set up some app settings in your website before it got there, it'll just pick those up. Okay? So that's environment-based config. This use services section, this is that new DI, dependency injection abstraction. This is where you're set up all the services that you want to be available through DI in your system. So, and everything's using it. EF is setting up their services. Here's where EF is configuring its options around getting that connection string. Here's the ASP.NET Identity setting up its services, and MVC setting up its services. So everybody's got a common set of services that you can inject and get access to. So DI throughout the system. Okay? And then we got use browser link. It's setting up browser link so you can connect browsers and have multiple browsers set up that you can just refresh them all. Use static files. Whoa. Like you don't normally say, I would like to be able to serve static files. But remember, this is the new HTTP request pipeline. It is totally modular and componentized. If you want it, you got to say you want it. If you didn't say you want it, you don't get it. So if you want to be able to serve up JavaScript files and CSS files and images, you got to say, I would like to be able to use static files. If you don't need that, then don't add the middleware. It's completely modular. We have support for security. Here's the cookie middleware, or the forms auth module equivalent in the ASP.NET vNext world. And then here's MVC. Okay? Now, MVC has a new implementation of ASP.NET routing, new routing implementation. And you'll notice that in this case, I have two routes. One is setting up what you would think of as like the default MVC route. And then the other one is like the default Web API route. And they're both using the same map route methods because they're both, we've now done that unification. MVC and Web API, they're using the same routing system. They're built on top of the same action dispatcher. It's the same infrastructure. You're just using it for, you have a controller that does APIs, or a controller that returns some JSON, or a controller that returns an HTML view. Okay? One cool thing, I don't know if you noticed, there's this question mark here. If you've seen attribute routing introduced some nice compact syntaxes around routing. And actually, this template's a little out of date. I'll just go ahead and update it. So you can actually do this now. Right in here, just say what the default values are for those route variables. You don't have to use this anonymous object syntax anymore. And that works just fine. So that's kind of cool. So a lot, with benefits, right? You're getting a lot of improvements in the frameworks as well. OK, and I think that still works. Let me just double check that. If I refresh this, that's fine. OK, yeah, didn't break anything. All right, now this is a little much for me to digest to get started. So let's just remove all this. I'm going to comment it out, and now we have the. I remember the IS guys did this demo once. Now we have the fastest, most secure web application ever. It's because it's got nothing in it. All right. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to save. Let me get the browser up, and I'm not going to build. There's no build step here. Okay? It's much more like that interpreted style programming. All I'm doing, I'm saving. I go to the browser, and I'm F5, and there's nothing here anymore, so I just should expect some, like, I don't know, 404 or something. Yeah, there's nothing there. Okay? But all I did was save and F5. And let's add a little bit of code, like our hello world, just to get up and get our feet wet. App.run. This is going to be some async logic, because everything on the server should be async. I'm going to take the request, and I'm going to set up the response and just write something to it, like ASP.NET vNext rocks. Okay? And that's async, right? So I've got to await it. Okay. All right, now let's save. Go back here, F5, and I should see some text output. There it is, okay? Let's make it a little bigger so you can actually see it. And I can just edit that code and change it, and it'll update in the browser. Now, how do project dependencies work in this space? So I'm going to add a new project here. Let's add that ASP.NET vNext class library. Class library 1 is a fine name. OK, so notice this guy also has that project.json file where I can manage its dependencies just like I could with my, my web application. Now, I don't need to add any dependencies for this guy, because all I'm going to do is create a little static class that returns a string. Let's say public static string get message return Tech Ed New Zealand. OK. Save. And now I want to, how do we add a reference now to this project? So what I can do, I go to project.json. Remember that IntelliSense that you saw before? That'll work also for your project references as well. So you see class library 1 is now showing up in the IntelliSense. And for the version, that's what the second number is. It doesn't have a version because it's just a class library, so we just can use quote, quote in this case. All right? Now this is, I don't know if you noticed, it's really nice. Like, there's no like file paths in here or anything like that. It's very, very clean. You could check this into your Git repository, clone it someplace else, and build it and run. You're ready to go. All right, now let me use that class library. Let's, instead of this, let's say class library. I didn't save my project.json file. Thank you, whoever was shouting that out. So yeah, there it is. I was like, where's the IntelliSense? All right, class library 1 class 1, get message. And now I'm going to do that same thing I did before, save. Save, F5 the browser, and I should see that change nearly instantaneously. So a little lag right now. Like I said, a lot of the optimizations haven't happened yet, but we expect that to be like, boom, you say edit, save, boom, you just see it in the browser. Okay? So that was cool. What about adding other package dependencies? Let's go and add back that the diagnostics package. Microsoft Diagnostics. Let's save that. Did it show up? Yep, okay, it's already there. And then let's go back to startup CS and let's use that diagnostics package. So the diagnostics package has a few helper libraries for just setting up a page, a welcome page, so you can check that your server is actually running. It also has like the error page, the yellow screen of death in ASP.NET. You have to add the yellow screen of death to ASP.NET vNext. I know, it's exciting. It's actually blue now, I think. I think they changed, better. It's improved, blue color. OK, so app.use welcome page, save. I just F5. I should be able to see the welcome page now. Oh, I did that again. I missed the, let me refresh it so you can see the lovely little ding, yay, happy face. OK, all right, so I think we kind of get how this is all working now, right? We've done some simple things. Let's go back to now the full MVC application and use what we learned. So I'm going to uncomment everything here. Like, does this actually work in like my controllers and so forth? So I'm going to go find my controller. Here's my home controller. Here's the message that's being displayed on the About page. So I'm going to use that class library again. Get message. OK, save. Now I should see, and you can click on it too. Someone spent a lot of time on that welcome page. All right, so there's Hello Tech in New Zealand. So it's actually working in the controller. And what's even cooler is this works for even the dependencies. If I go into the class library and change this and say, that's not nearly enough exclamation points, and I save that, go back here, F5, I'll see all the exclamation points being picked up even for stuff that's being tracked in dependencies. Okay, so that's better dependency management, modular HTTP request pipeline. Now this is all running, this is MVC, MVC Web API, Web Pages thing running all inside of IIS, running on the desktop CLR. Now remember, we said we could self-host these applications. So let me go back to that project.json file. There it is. All right, now you notice there's this command section here. You see that? The command section are different commands that you can execute to run your application. This command is saying that if I run the web command, I'd like you to use our hosting infrastructure, the ASP.NET vNext hosting infrastructure, and use this particular server. I want you to use the new super fast web listener as the server. And the URL I want you to host on is HP localhost 5000. Okay? Now, this is where I can now show you the command line tooling experience for ASP.NET vNext. Because all this stuff you were doing in Visual Studio, you could do virtually everything also from the command line. So let me drop to the command line. Now, the tools you need to know when you're dealing with ASP.NET vNext at the command line is, first of all, you're going to want to get the K version manager. Now people are going to ask me, like, K? Like, where does K come from? K for Katana, K for cool. I don't actually know. You make up whatever rumor you'd like about what the K means. But internally, it's our code name. Project K is what we call ASP.NET vNext. Now that Republic, it's not really any point in using a code name anymore. But whatever. So K, all the Ks will probably disappear by the time we ship. So I've already installed KVM. And KVM is the thing you use to manage the different versions of the ASP.NET vNext runtime that you have on the machine. You can have multiple versions of the runtime on the machine. So KVM, bunch of spew. All right, KVM list. That will show me all the versions of ASP.NET vNext I have in the machine. I have Alpha 3, some particular build number for desktop CLR, and this little C next to the 50 means for core CLR also. So I have 2. And you could have like 10, as many of these as you want. OK, now it looks like I'm already using you see the little star. It's saying that this version is the one that's already active. If that wasn't already selected, what you would do is you would say KVM use, and then you can use that to pick the specific version of the CLR that you want to run on. Okay? And there's even aliases, like the way you would select which runtime you want to run on is you'd have to actually type out the version number, which can be a bit of a pain. But you can set up aliases that map to specific versions, and then you could say like KVMU's default or the alias name that you want to use. Okay, so that's how you do that. Looks like it's already set up here. So I want to run that command. Let me see here. Where's my application? Web application 1, right? Okay. All right, and web application 1. Let's get this. Let's see. Do we got it? Project.json, good. Now the way you run commands in ASP.NET vNext is you use the K script, just K, and then you type the name of the command, so kweb in this case, so kweb. And what that should do is it should then host that web application at localhost 5000 using the web listener self-host, the full app. Let's see. So I'm going to switch this from localhost 28257 to localhost 5000. Was it 5000 or 5001? Who remembers? 5000. Voila. Okay? That is self-hosted MVC. Full web UI, web API, web stack, all running within its own process. And it's the same app that we saw before. You know, Tech in New Zealand, a bunch of exclamation points. Okay? So that's self-hosted ASP.NET vNext. Pretty cool. All right. Now, what else do we want to do? We want to show that the core CLR, you know, cloud optimized runtime. Now, the cloud optimized runtime supports true side-by-side versioning. It can run in environments where, you know, full .NET could never run before. It's very small. It's very lightweight. What we do to switch to core CLR is we just right-click Properties, and I'm going to switch the active target framework to .NET Core. Okay? I think I have to do that for the other project as well. So let me do that. Properties. Did I select the solution by accident? I did. Okay, I switch this over to the core CLR. All right. All right, and now what you can then do, I'm going to publish this to the file system. Let's see, publish. We do have support. You can publish ASP.NET vNext apps right up to Azure today. We have support for that. But in this case, I'm just going to publish it to the file system. I need to define a profile name. How about cool? All right, and let's put this at C:, users, MVC6 app. Now, before I do that, let me make sure there's nothing there. So here, MVC6 apps on my desktop, empty folder, nothing here. Okay. Let's publish that. And now what this is doing is it's bundling everything in the app and also including with it the core CLR into just a big folder. And it's a little bit of stuff. I think when it's finally all said and done with all of MVC and EF and identity, there'll be about 100 megabytes of things. But it's completely self-contained. So you see here, down here, it's right there. It's done. Let's go look at what it created for us. All right, now if we go digging down in here, let me go look in the packages folder. So there's all the packages that it depends on. Looks like a big long list. A lot of these are very, very granular. But down here is the actual K runtime. Okay, ASP.NET vNext runtime. And if I go looking in the packages folder, that's not the one I wanted. Bin. Okay, bin. Down in here someplace, there should be, there, coreclr.dll is actually with the app, okay? Now to run this, you notice that we took the commands and turned them into little CMD scripts, so you can just run them. So I'm going to run this guy. Should see a similar experience. Started. Oh, I have it already running someplace else. Let me stop this one. It said the port was already taken. So I'm running it again now that the other server is down. Okay, so this one started. Okay. Now I have an MVC app running on this self-contained CLR. Now you can take this app now. You could copy it onto like a thumb drive and pop it into someone else's laptop and run it right off that thumb drive without installing anything on the machine. Just to prove that, what I did is I went to Windows Azure and I got myself a VM. In this case, this is a Windows Server 2008 R2 VM. It's only got .NET 4 installed. I haven't installed any ASP.NET vNext bits on this machine at all. And all I did, literally, was take that folder that I just produced there and copied it up here. I'm going to spare you the amount of time it takes to move the 100 megabytes up. but you can now, on this Win2K8 R2, which has .NET 4 or some old version of .NET installed on it, I can run on the latest, greatest version of the CLR, the latest, greatest version of the MVC, Web API, Web Pages bits, and not have to worry about that at all. It affects nothing else on the machine. Started. Let's see if it actually is going to work. And voila. Wow, okay? You are free. Just go ahead. Use the great latest bits, okay? All right, now that's cool. That's pretty cool. This is also kind of cool. Let's do this. This is where I have to remember my password again, I think. Wake up. All right, great. All right, so this is a Mac. You are going to see me write dir and miscapitalize things left and right as I try and do this. But here we have a Mac, and what I've done is I've installed ASP.NET vNext, a version of the ASP.NET vNext runtime on this machine for use. Okay, so I can do the same thing that I was doing before, KVM. There's the spew from KVM. KVM list will show me the versions of the ASP.NET vNext runtime. Here I have a version of Alpha 3 and a brand new build of Alpha 4, all running on the mono CLR. Do you see that? See where it says runtime? Mono CLR? Okay? Now, for the Mac development experience, we created the experience doing how we do most of our mission-critical development experience development efforts, which is we got an intern. And the intern did a bunch of really cool things on a Mac to make this a little bit easier. So one of the things he did is he created a Yeoman generator. Yeoman is a scaffolding engine that's available on a Mac. So I think I can say yo ASP.NET. Yo. OK. And it's saying, what would you like to create? I would like to create an MVC application. Yes. All right. Fetching a bunch of stuff. And now, so it created the app and went ahead and kicked off a package restore. So it's pulling down all the NuGet packages off of our dev feed, which is hosted on MyGet, and installing them. OK, so it's all there. So I should be able to list. Let me do it up here so you can see it. All right, yeah, there's my backup one, and there's the real one. So cd MVC application. And then we got a project.json. We got some views. We have controllers. This is an MVC app. All right, if I do, let's look at the project.json real fast. So this guy looks a little different. I mean, it has the same set of dependencies, the same packages are being used, both on my Windows machine and on this Mac. It has a new command. Did you see that? It has this kestrel command. Now, the web command is there too, because maybe I'm cloning this onto a Mac and I'm doing development on my Mac. Someone else is doing it on a Windows machine. That's totally fine. The web command was based off of Web Listener, which is based off of HTTP/sys. And there's no HTTP/sys on my Mac. But there is this lightweight web server that we built that we call Kestrel. A kestrel is a small, fast bird. It's also a lightweight web server that you can use for development on a Mac. Okay? So in this case, instead of typing kweb, I'm going to type kkestrel. Make sure I spell it right. It's EL. Get that wrong all the time. Started. And what was and the port? I think the default port is 5000 for Kestrel. And whoa. That is ASP.NET MVC 6 running on a Mac. Now, another cool thing. Oh, is that cool? Do you think that's cool? That's pretty awesome. Come on. That's pretty cool. All right. I also have Sublime on here. Sublime is a popular text editor for Macs. I'm going to open up that folder. And this one, right? Yeah, open. Oh, it's going to create another one of those things. I can see the Mac folks out there going like, total noob, it doesn't know what it's doing. All right, so here's the app in Sublime. There's like project.json, and then he did some nice things like some very, you can have the editor here and save. Okay, now what I'm going to try and do here is he created a Sublime plugin where you can actually run the K commands directly from within Sublime. So if do I make that bigger? Oh, that's nice. OK, great. So I'm going to do this Command-Shift-P thing and type K. And then you see there's run K commands. And this plugin he called Culture with a K, so Kulture. You can get it online. There's a blog post about it. And look, there's all my K commands showing up right within Sublime. So there's some nice integration with Sublime. Use the tools that you want to do. I can run that K Kestrel script again. This has started, and it's up and running again in, let me just refresh it so we can see that it actually worked. Okay, so you can use in Sublime, Sublime plugins, use the tools that you want, develop on a Mac, you get the Premiere development experience in Visual Studio, you can run it on a thumb drive, you can run it up in the cloud on a Win2Create R2 machine. I saw a forum post where someone took the mono support for ASP.NET vNext, and they took a Raspberry Pi. You know what Raspberry Pi is? It's this delicious pastry treat. No, it's also this little hardware board, like an ARM chip. And there's a build of Mono that can run on this chip. And they got ASP.NET vNext kind of working on this Raspberry Pi. It was slower than molasses, but it ran. Like, you could never do that before. That was just blew my mind. So very, very cool stuff. You can run .NET more places than you ever could before. That's not the one I wanted to press. That's the one I wanted to press. All right, so a quick word on compatibility in this last few minutes. Like, what does this mean? If you want to move to ASP.NET vNext, what's going to work? What's not going to work? So if you want to do web forms, MVC5, Web API 2, Web Pages 3, those are supported on the .NET framework. They'll be supported on .NET vNext. They'll be supported forever. Okay, so those apps carry on the existing .NET framework. If you want to use MVC6, this MVC Web API Web Pages 6 combined stack, or Signal R3, those things are all based on the new ASP.NET lightweight HTTP request pipeline. Okay? So that means you can't use them inside of a system web-based application. They only run within the new runtime and on top of the new request pipeline. Okay? So that means you're going to be using the new project system in Visual Studio, and there will be some code churn as you move from the system web HTTP context to the new HTTP context. And we're also taking this opportunity to align the stacks. When you align the stacks, there's multiple ways of doing things, and you pick one, well, that means one of the ways can't work. You can't have both, right? So there is some changes. So moving to MVC6 generally involves creating a new project in Visual Studio 14, copying over code, getting it to compile. It takes about maybe half a day for a small to medium-sized project. We are very cognizant of this. We're working very hard to make sure that the code that you write, the top-level code, looks and feels the same as it always has. So that level of compatibility. Now, if you want to run on the cloud-optimized runtime, there's more work that you'll have to do, because you only have the API surface area available to you that's available on the cloud-optimized runtime. And not everything's even there yet. Like, there's libraries that are being still moved to the cloud-optimized runtime by our friends on the .NET team. So you may try to port stuff to the cloud-optimized runtime, and maybe you have a dependency on, something in WIF. Well, those libraries aren't even available yet on core CLR. So you may be blocked, you may have to wait. But if you want to move onto the cloud-optimized runtime, you have to be able to compile against that new surface area. We do have a tool, the API portability scanner, which I had a link to earlier, but you can find it online. It's on the download center, that you can run over your assemblies and see which APIs they're using and whether they're currently available in the cloud-optimized runtime, or if they've moved or changed, what APIs you should use instead. So if you want to see, are you cloud-optimized runtime ready, go ahead and take your binaries and run them through that tool. Okay? What time frame are we on? We've been shipping an alpha release about once a month, about once every 6 weeks or so through the summer. We're about to ship Alpha 4 up here in the next couple weeks. We expect to go to a beta preview release by the end of the year, and we hope to ship by the release candidate in first quarter of 2015, and then release to the web as a fully stable release in roughly second quarter of 2015. All dates subject to change, but that's roughly the time frame we're on in the spirit of openness and transparency. For additional resources, I encourage you to go to the ASP.NET vNext site, read the documentation, lots of walkthroughs on how to get started. Also check out our GitHub project. You can see the code, and I hope you really liked what you saw. If you want to learn more about the other stuff that's happening in .NET on the client side, there's a CLR confidential talk that looks like they're going to be talking about .NET Native and those types of things. And if you have any questions for me, feel free to find me in the expert zone from 1:30 to 2:30 later today. And thank you, everyone, for showing. ASP.NET vNext. Woo!